Hello, and thanks for tuning into the show that goes around the continent to bring you stories near and far. I'm Joke Rogers at Channels Television here in Lagos, and I'm joined by Vincent McCory from The Voice of America in Washington.
Thanks. I'm Vincent McCory at The Voice of America. Happy to be with you again for another edition of Africa 54. Our broadcast here looks a little different because of the global pandemic, but we truly appreciate you staying with us on Africa 54. Let's start off with the latest from Nigeria. Joke Rogers in Lagos brings you that story.
As Nigeria joins the rest of the world to mark this year's International Day of the Girl Child, issues of access to the digital space, security, and the provision of basic amenities to help the girl child fulfill her potential continues to resonate. Speakers at an event in Abuja, Nigeria's capital, lament the gap in the access to the digital world by the girl child, as about 2.2 billion youths below the age of 25 lack access to the internet at home, and the majority of this population are girls.
It's another year to mark the International Day of the Girl Child, but across the country, girls continue to face one form of injustice or the other. While some are left on the streets to hawk and fend for themselves at a very young age, those in school or at home face some form of insecurity. At one of the meetings to mark the day in Abuja, some girls are seeking ways to ensure that the girl child is protected and given access to the digital world to bring her potential to bear.
Only 1 out of 6 girls who graduated from primary school are able to transit to secondary school. I asked them, where are the rest of the girls? We must find them. Where are they? What are they doing? Why are they not in school?
Without education, you can't go anywhere. So I want the society and the government to, place more attention on the education of a girl child.
According to statistics from the Federal Ministry of Education's 2019 to 2020 school census, the national average for transition of girls from primary to secondary school stands at 64%, while transition from primary to secondary schools in the north stands at 58%. The statistics further reveal that about 2.2 billion youths below the age of 25 lack access to internet at home, and the majority of this population are made up of girls. This is one situation government and development partners are promising to tackle.
There is the need for all hands to be on deck.
To secondary school. Where are the rest of them? We must find them. Where are they? What are they doing? Why are they not in school?
Without
The girls.
So I want the society and the government.
This is important for society and for Africa because we are celebrating a girl child, someone who is potentially the mother of the nation, someone who will bring up many future generations of children and equipping them with confidence and trust in themselves.
At another meeting, the National Center for Women Development commits to launching girls into the digital space.
This year alone, over 100 girls were empowered with free laptops to mark the 2021 Girls in ICT Day, as they were trained and exposed to the vast possibilities of ICT offers.
For now, issues of child marriages, rape, insecurity, and lack of amenities continue to serve as a setback in helping the girl child fulfill her dreams of a better future. Commitments like this give assurances of hope.
Joining us now is Lola Alunge, Founder, Executive Director, Child Health Advocacy Initiative. Thank you for joining us today on Africa 54.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So the theme for this year's International Day of the Girl Child is Digital Generation, Our Generation. How do you interpret this to help the girl child in her quest for education?
Well, I think I will start by a quote by the Deputy Secretary General of the UN, Amina Mohammed, when she said the issue of the girl child should not be what we just raise our awareness about for just one day or talk about it. We should be intentional about it. We should make it what we talk about and do every day if we want to empower them and make sure they are well educated. Because we obviously know that educating the girl child would obviously help the family, would help the nation, and it's the right thing to do and the best thing to do. Because if we want to even end the cycle of poverty, it starts by educating the girl child. So we know we are in the digital era, and of course we've seen what happened during the pandemic. The classroom actually shifted online. So obviously the girls must be computer literate, they must have access to computers. And not only that, we also realized, even, for example, my NGO, we do a lot of information sharing on reproductive health with adolescent girls. And then we send it through their emails. At times we send some things, text messages to their phones. And we realized that in some communities, a lot of them don't even have access to it. We even have like hotlines they're supposed to call when they're like sexually abused or they have a case of violence to report, which was rampant during the pandemic and even still on. A lot of them don't have access to a phone. We also know through the internet, they need to connect with others, they get to know, have job opportunities. So a lot of things that would help to develop the girl child and empower them can only be done if they have access to the internet and if they are computer literate.
Security also remains a major concern for female students, as many as other challenges. What can the government and other individuals, societies, communities do to prioritize access to the digital space?
That's a real serious issue. Because we realize that some of the girls some are not even in school. For example, in Nigeria, we talk about the out-of-school children, over 10 million. Majority of them are girls. So which means a lot of them are not even in school. They can't have access to internet. Their parents don't want them to go to school because they are scared, especially in the northern states. Maybe they may be kidnapped, cases of terrorism and all that. So they are out of school. So that's an issue, really cutting out and leaving some of these girls behind. On the issue of safety as well, online, we realize there's a lot of bullying going on, there's a lot of violence. A lot of them actually get bullied, and some go into depression and all that. So obviously there's a lot of need to put measures in place. Some even go beyond the knowledge they should be getting there and do some other bad things, so which means there should be parental guidance. They should monitor what they do online.
What needs to change so that the girl child is well aware of her rights and society providing the enabling environment for the girl child to thrive?
Yeah, that's a good question, because we just have to find the solution. And that starts with the family. I think parents, they need to change their own orientation and their mindset of thinking. Stop discriminating between the boy and the girl, and let the girls know they can achieve whatever they want to achieve. They can be whoever they want to be. And then encourage them to go into STEM, that's science, technology, engineering, and maths, because that's where they are actually making a lot of money now. Encourage them to go into coding. Then, of course, in schools too, the schools should see how to support these girls and give them a lot of training to make sure they are digitally good. And of course, government as well. There should be a lot of policies to support girls, which is like sponsoring some of these girls, giving incentives to them. Also supporting schools with computers, and even the private sector donating computers to the children, to the girls in school.
Beautiful thoughts there. Lola Alonge, founder, executive director, Child Health Advocacy Initiative. Thank you again for joining us today on Africa 54.
Female circumcision, known as female genital mutilation or FGM, is illegal in Kenya, but still being forced on young girls in some areas. Cases increased after schools closed due to the pandemic, but one survivor is fighting the practice in an ethnic Somali community. Brenda Molinia reports from Garissa, Kenya.
23-year-old Yasmin Mohammed volunteers with Silver Lining Kenya, an organization that champions the rights of young girls and women in Kenya's Garissa County. She is focused on eradicating the illegal and harmful practice of female genital mutilation, or FGM.
As someone who has gone through the act, I know how harmful this is.
She and other activists have joined the government's drive to end cases of female genital mutilation. The number of FGM cases jumped after the coronavirus pandemic forced schools to close, particularly in Somali communities in Garissa.
During COVID, it was a moment of staying together. So that is when parents will realize, oh, these children are growing. So for the ones who are young, there is a need for them to go through the cut.
The practice of FGM remains illegal in Kenya, with the government pledging to eradicate it by the end of 2022, 8 years ahead of the global deadline of 2030. Maka Kasim, a community leader involved in rescuing girls from the practice, says it still thrives in places like Garissa because of strong cultural and religious beliefs.
The Somali culturals, they believe if a girl doesn't go through the cut, she is like someone who is not clean. She is a killing person.
The Kenyan government's anti-FGM board is leading the campaign against the harmful practice. The board's CEO, Bernadette Loloju, says keeping schools open is critical to combating the problem, but there are other challenges too.
The only big challenge we have is that girls are getting cut at a younger age when they don't understand what has happened to them. So the communities are really coming up with other new ways of evading the law.
Still, Kenya officials say there are hopeful efforts by the government, and advocates for the girls will keep the country on track to bring the practice to an end. Brenda Molinya for VOA News, Garissa, Kenya.
Large blue boxes that look like ATM machines have been popping up across Kenya's capital, Nairobi. But instead of dispensing cash, they give out clean cooking fuel that's both good for the environment and safer to use than traditional wood or kerosene. Restaurants also are now opting for cocoa fuel operations. Take a listen.
In Kenya's capital, Nairobi, restaurant owner Miriam Kamau lifts a steaming ladle of food from a stove burning locally produced ethanol, a fuel made from the byproducts of sugar production. She's one of about 200,000 customers of 3-year-old Kenyan company Cocoa, who've replaced fuel like charcoal, kerosene and liquefied petroleum gas with locally produced ethanol.
7 years.
I have been operating this business for 7 years, and I've actually been using cocoa fuel for 3 years.
Ethanol from agricultural waste helps cut down on greenhouse emissions, partly because consumers won't be using charcoal made from cutting down trees. The United Nations Environmental Programme says sugarcane bioethanol can reduce emissions by 40 to 62% compared to petroleum-derived fuel. Cocoa sells a litre of its biofuel for 77.83 Kenya shillings. The minimum purchase is 30 shillings. A litre of kerosene in Nairobi costs 110.82 shillings. Gas can only be bought in more expensive canisters.
It has really helped me because cooking gas costs me 1,000 Kenya shillings to refill, but with cocoa, I can get even 100 shillings worth of fuel.
Biofuel can be both economical and environmental friendly, according to Washington, D.C.-based think tank Competitive Enterprise Institute.
Using the waste of the product that was used to make sugar and molasses and so on to create something that I can still reutilize it again and recycle it. So all in a way to try and also meet up with the climatic requirements we have now, the climatic conditions now. We've known we have destroyed quite a bit of our forest coverage and so on and so forth.
Kenya has given ethanol producers using sugar processing waste an exemption from the 16% value-added tax to encourage ethanol production to grow in tandem with the sugar industry, one of the nation's common crops. Cocoa plans to expand to 10 other Kenyan towns in the future.
There is a new weapon against COVID-19, and it's in a capsule form. VOA's Caroline Presutti explains how it's a breakthrough and why other pills have been discovered that we haven't heard about.
A stark illustration of the new number of COVID deaths in the United States, 700,000. From the White House,
that is a striking, horrifying number of lives lost.
But now, new hope. A pill that drug company Merck says prevents the coronavirus from multiplying. So promising that the clinical trials were stopped early, so more lives could be saved. Taken at the onset of the disease, the pill reduces the risk of hospitalization or death by half.
They could go to their pharmacy and take their medication the way they do other medicines. This would allow us to treat many more people much more quickly, and we trust much less expensively.
Dr. Caleb Hernandez is an emergency room doctor who also researches COVID drug discoveries. He says 3 other pills have been introduced, one that reduces the need for oxygen by 3-fold, but not under big pharmaceutical names. So they sit on a shelf without the money for FDA approval.
Our government isn't set up to spend the $500,000 to do these studies. We rely on private companies to bring things to the FDA. And that's why you're not going to see as much innovation as you could see.
Experts worry that Americans will rely more on this new pill and avoid vaccines that teach the body to make its own coronavirus antibodies. But for remote countries, pills may be easier to administer. Affordability and distribution are other factors, though. Hernandez hopes that some drug, any drug, will end the pandemic. He sings this tribute to a fellow doctor who quit the profession because he was burned out from COVID.
We've been going for almost 2 years now, fighting every day, watching people die. And I think it's difficult when people in the community don't believe you. They think that you're part of some conspiracy or you're exaggerating or making things up. And then you go to work and you have to pronounce multiple people dead.
Merck plans to seek approval for emergency use of the drug, which could take about 2 months. Carolyn Presutti, VOA News.
Keeping thousands of volumes of Egypt's most important movie posters, photographs, cinema projectors and film negatives, Egyptian archivists Makram Salama is preserving what could be some of the rarest collections of the country's rich cinematic heritage.
In a small apartment turned museum in the northern city of Alexandria, 72-year-old Makram Salama's cluttered collection of negatives, posters and projectors traces the history of Egyptian cinema through its 20th century heyday. The collection started with photos and posters from his hometown in southern Egypt, where he worked in a sugarcane factory, and grew to include thousands of items picked up from production companies and others who abandoned them as they switched to digital film. Items include 50 vintage cinema projectors and a rare poster from the 1932 film The Egyptian Author, which Salama says it's thought to be one of the country's oldest.
The place here is a museum for cinema. I have been collecting this for 50 years, and I put everything I got here. I have movies, documentaries, movie posters, photographs, and everything that belongs to Egyptian cinema.
The Egyptian film industry flourished midway through the late century when it was one of the world's largest. It later faded, and Egypt's tumultuous uprising in 2011 and the sometimes violent aftermath set it back further.
There are things that I will not be able to sell. The things that belong to Egypt, I cannot sell at all. I can't sell anything that is important to the state or rare movie posters. I will sell the normal items. I am keeping aside a box or two for the documents that belong to the country. For example, I have negatives for late President Gamal Abdel Nasser. Would I sell Abdel Nasser's negatives, his photographs? This is just one of the names.
As of 2018, Egypt was home to 78 cinemas, mostly in Greater Cairo and Alexandria, down from 110 in 2010. According to the annual cultural survey released by the country's official statistics agency, CAPMAS.
Saloum used to have a cinema. Matroh used to have a cinema. Petroleum companies in the desert used to have cinema halls for private screenings. All this was a source of income for the government. All this is now gone. I am sad, really sad. Cinema used to be the second most important product for the country after cotton.
10 regions, mostly in southern Egypt, have no cinemas at all, the survey says.
The South American water hyacinth is an invasive weed in Africa that blocks waterways and kills native plants. In the West African country of Benin, entrepreneurs are finding creative ways to harvest the hyacinth to help clean up the environment. Moki Edwin Kinseka narrates this report by Anne Nzokyo in the lake village of Genvio, Benin.
Genvio is the largest lake city in West Africa. But the invasive water hyacinth has made life on the lake a struggle for navigation and fishing. To cope with the problem, local authorities are training women to harvest the hyacinth for compost and to make artwork.
Ça fait un plus-value. C'est une activité générative de...
It's an added value, an income-generating activity for these groups. In the past, people used to say in the local language, toble, or hyacinth is bad. Today, the hyacinth is called tognon, or the benefactor.
Beninese mechanic Dieudonné Siwale has a messy job that leaves oil spills that can pollute the environment. But for the past 2 years, he has been using a fiber made from hyacinth that absorbs the oil waste so it can be swept up and disposed.
Le nettoyage est tellement propre et on a la...
Now the cleaning is so clean and it's easy to get the hydrocarbons off the floor. Before, I only used sand, and then the floor was not clean. Besides, the recycling of sand is not easy, nor recommended.
Beninese startup Greenkeeper Africa makes the fiber to reduce both the hyacinth problem and oil pollution. Founder Fola Muftao says 1 kilogram of hyacinth fiber can absorb up to 12 kilograms of oil.
The hyacinth is collected, processed, sold to the customer, and we recover it after use for incineration. This is the first purely African solution that allows us to manage both an environmental and an industrial problem in a sustainable way.
Local authorities are expanding the plant's use with a hyacinth-based ethanol gel that can be used for cooking fuel instead of burning wood. Beninese authorities hope the innovations will turn an invasive pest into a useful tool and protect their unique lake city. For Anne Zwanke in Genvio, Benin, Moki Edwin Kinzeka for VOA News.
Well, and that's our show for today. You can find all the continent's top news and world news online at voaafrica.com. Check it out. I'm Vincent McCory in Washington. Channels Television has our last word from Lagos.
We look forward to bringing you another show next week. Do remember that channelstv.com is your source for news and other programming. I'm Joke Rogers. Thanks for watching and goodbye.